I'll never forget the way the room smelled that morning somewhere between old paper, too much cologne, and expensive grief. The lawyer's office was one of those stuffy old Victorian homes-turned firms in downtown Portland, all dark wood paneling and fraying oriental rugs. Outside, the drizzle of an Oregon fall tapped at the stained glass windows, soft and rhythmic. My condolences, the receptionist had said flatly, gesturing me into the conference room where my brother, Owen, was already seated. He hadn't shaved. His shirt looked slept in, but his jaw was set. Business as usual for Owen. I'm Charlotte Grant Charlie to most. 34 years old, born and raised right here in Portland, freelance web designer by trade. A decade in the business. I've always been the practical one in the family. Not exactly the center of attention at family gatherings, not with a golden child brother like Owen around. Successful architect, always in glossy alumni magazines. The one our parents bragged about to their friends. Me, I built websites for yoga studios and coffee roasters. That morning was the first time we'd sat in a room together since Dad's funeral. The silence between us was thick. Owen didn't even look up when I sat down. Mr. Callahan, our parents' longtime lawyer, well into his 70s, now shuffled papers with a sigh. Well, let's begin. It should have been simple. Our parents had always been clear. The estate would be split evenly. The old Grant family house, a 3-story beauty up in West Hills, worth millions now, was supposed to be shared, or sold with proceeds split. That's what Dad had said for years. Except that wasn't what the will said. My mouth went dry as Mr. Callahan read, "To my beloved son, Owen Grant, I leave the Grant family estate in full. To my daughter, Charlotte Grant, I leave the property at 318 Dalton Street." I blinked. Dalton Street. Owen let out the faintest smirk. He knew, of course he knew. 318 Dalton was the old side property half collapsed, termite riddled, barely worth the taxes owed. No one had lived there in 20 years. Dad had always talked about tearing it down. I felt my face flush, my pulse hammering in my ears. "Excuse me, there must be a mistake." Callahan held up a hand. "This is the document on file. Signed and notarized?" And then, as if on cue, he slid a thick, sealed envelope across the table. Heavy parchment, my name written in my mother's familiar, looping hand. No one explained. No one looked at me. Owen stood. "If that's all," he said coolly, already reaching for his coat. "Wait." I managed. "How did this happen?" He gave me a glance that barely concealed his satisfaction. "Maybe you should read your letter, Charlie." And just like that, he was gone. I sat there, stunned, as Mr. Callahan gathered his things. I don't understand," I whispered. The old lawyer looked at me, something weary in his eyes. "I wasn't the one who drew up this last version," he said softly. "Another firm handled it. Very near the end. I wasn't informed until after." He hesitated, then added, "But you may want to read that letter carefully." He left me alone in that heavy room, the sealed envelope cold in my hand. I didn't open it there. Something about it felt private, intimate. Instead, I drove back through the gray drizzle, the letter sitting on the passenger seat like a weight. My little apartment in Selwood felt smaller than usual when I got home, cluttered with houseplants and the hum of my ancient refrigerator. I made tea, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the envelope for a long time. My fingers trembled as I broke the wax seal. Inside, a handwritten letter from Mom. No dates, no signature, just her familiar penmanship. "My darling Charlie, there are things you don't know. If you're reading this, it means I wasn't able to set things right in time, but there are records locked beneath the old floorboards in the study at Dalton Street. I wanted to tell you so many times. I'm sorry." That was it. No explanations, no comfort, just mystery. I sat back, heart pounding. I could barely process what had happened. My brother had walked away with everything. I'd been handed a rotting house. And this cryptic message, outside, the rain deepened. The house on Dalton Street, floorboards, records. I swallowed hard. Well then, looks like I'd be paying Dalton Street a visit after all. The next morning, Portland's sky was slate gray, the kind of heavy, wet overcast that just soaked into your bones. Perfect mood. Really, I loaded up my beat-up Subaru with gloves, a flashlight, crowbar, whatever I thought might be useful for rooting through a decrepit house, and drove over to 318 Dalton Street. I hadn't been there in years. The old place sat hunched on the edge of a forgotten lot near Forest Park, barely visible from the road through a tangle of ivy and blackberry brambles. The sagging roof, paint peeling in great curls. and boards over half the windows didn't inspire confidence. As I wrestled open the rusted lock with a satisfying clunk, a crow somewhere above let out a long, ragged caw, real welcoming. I muttered, pushing the warped front door inward. The smell hit me first damp rot, old wood, and something almost metallic. The floorboards groaned underfoot. Dust motes swirled in the dim light filtering through gaps in the boarded windows. The old study had been Dad's space decades ago, before he lost interest. Thick green velvet curtains still hung, heavy with dust. The battered desk and half-empty bookshelves looked untouched. I set down my bag, pulled on gloves, and began tapping along the floorboards. It didn't take long. Near the hearth, one loose board gave way beneath my crowbar with a sharp crack. Underneath, a shallow cavity lined with oilcloth. Inside, surprisingly dry after all these years, sat an old leather-bound ledger and a bundle of folded letters tied with string. I sat back on my heels. Well, hello. I carried them to the desk, brushed off the dust. The ledger's cover was cracked, but the pages inside were still legible. Meticulous columns of numbers, names, dates spanning decades, payments, withdrawals, large sums flowing in and out of something called Grant Holdings, LLC. I blinked. I'd never heard of that company name. My parents weren't big business types. They owned the estate. Dad had a pension. Mom volunteered at the library. Nothing like this had ever been mentioned. The letters were even stranger. Some were in my father's hand, others from someone named R. Langston. The tone formal, careful. Discussions of asset transfers, legal loopholes, phrases like ensuring proper succession and shielding from outside scrutiny. My skin prickled. This wasn't just old bookkeeping. This was something bigger and very much hidden. Suddenly, my brother's smug face flashed in my mind. He knew, of course he did. That's why he hadn't been surprised at the will. That's why he'd said, maybe you should read your letter. I sat in that cold, musty room for hours, going through every page. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became. This LLC held the real money, not just the family house, but multiple investment properties I'd never heard about, rental incomes, even stocks, millions. And somehow, all of it had been funneled through legal channels connected to the family estate Owen now controlled. By the time the light was fading and the house seemed to creak louder with the damp, my head was spinning. I packed the ledger and letters into my backpack, locked up, and drove home in a daze. At my apartment, I spread the documents out on the kitchen table. The tea I made went cold. Something didn't add up. My parents wouldn't have knowingly left me with nothing, not when they'd always talked about fairness between Owen and me. And Mom's letter, I wasn't able to set things right. That meant someone else had set things wrong. And I had a pretty good guess who. It was nearly midnight when, on impulse, I picked up my phone and dialed my brother. He answered after 3 rings, voice tight. Charlie. I took a steadying breath. Owen, we need to talk. There was a long pause. I could almost hear the calculation behind his silence. Then, about what? The house, the ledger, the letters I found, a sharp intake of breath. You went there. Yes. Another pause. His tone, when he finally spoke again, was cold, measured. Charlie, he said quietly, I'm going to give you some advice. Let it go, for your own good. And with that, he hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand, heart pounding. So much for a friendly sibling chat. If there was any doubt left before, it was gone now. Something was very, very wrong here, and letting it go, not a chance. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. I lay awake in my little apartment, staring at the ceiling as the hours slipped by, my mind churning with questions. Let it go. That one phrase kept playing in my head, over and over, like some bad movie stuck on a loop. Owen's voice had been so flat, not concerned, not apologetic, just cold, which meant he wasn't worried I'd found the old ledger. He was worried what I might do with it. By sunrise, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't letting this go. Not even close. But I needed help. And fast. Coffee first. Though. Lots of it. By 9 I was parked outside the only place I could think of. The old law office of Mr. Callahan. If anyone still knew the full story of our family's affairs, it was him. The place looked even shabbier by daylight. The brass letters on the door were tarnished. The wooden sign barely legible. I knocked anyway. A familiar shuffle of footsteps. Then the door creaked open. Miss Grant. Mr. Callahan blinked at me, looking a little surprised. Back so soon. I held up the leather ledger. I found something. He glanced at it, then motioned me inside. You'd better come in. The old man brewed us both some truly terrible instant coffee and settled across from me at the heavy oak table. I laid out the ledger and the bundle of letters. What is this? I asked. Mr. Callahan adjusted his glasses and began thumbing through the pages, his frown deepening with each line. Good heavens, he murmured. I haven't seen these names in decades. You knew about this. I knew pieces, he admitted. Your grandfather set up Grant Holdings LLC back in the 60s as a way to manage certain assets discreetly. Over time, it became rather more than that, but I wasn't involved with those particular dealings. He tapped one page with a bony finger. This is significant. I had no idea the holdings were this extensive. Neither did I said tightly. But Owen obviously does. Callahan's brow furrowed. It does appear he's maneuvered things. And this will... He shook his head. It's not consistent with what your parents told me for years. I suspect he trailed off, glancing at the closed door. Suspend your professional caution. Mr. Callahan. I said, I need answers. He sighed. I suspect that very late in the process, your brother worked with another firm, pressured your parents, possibly had documents redrafted when your father was already quite ill. My chest tightened. You think he manipulated them? I can't say for certain, he said softly, but I wouldn't dismiss the possibility. I sat back, heart racing. That's when he added, almost absently, there was a clause in an older draft of the will, one your father insisted on keeping. It stated that if any irregularities were found in the transfer of Grant Holdings, the estate would revert to equal division. But it expires in 90 days from the date of probate. I stared at him. And how long has it been? He did a quick mental calculation. Roughly 56 days. I nearly choked on my coffee. That left me a little over a month to prove irregularities, or lose everything. The weight of it hit me hard. If I failed, Owen would not only keep the estate, he'd bury the truth forever. I ran a hand through my hair. Then I need to act now. Mr. Callahan nodded solemnly. You'll need real evidence. Something concrete. I've got to start, I said, tapping the ledger. But I'll need more. He hesitated. There's one other person who might help. Rebecca Langston. She was your father's accountant. Semi-retired now, but sharp as ever. She might have seen more than I did. I jotted down the name. I'll find her. Before I left, I glanced back at him. Mr. Callahan, Owen told me to drop this. For my own good. The old man's eyes narrowed. Then I suggest you be careful. Miss Grant, if your brother has come this far, he may go further. Charming thought. I left the office with my mind buzzing, adrenaline surging through my veins. My brother had underestimated me. He thought I'd roll over, take the rotting house, and disappear quietly. Well, surprise, Owen. The game was on. I wasn't sure what I expected when I knocked on Rebecca Langston's door. Maybe some crusty old accountant with glasses perched on the end of her nose. Buried in dusty files, what I got was something else entirely. Rebecca opened the door in yoga pants and a loose sweater, graying hair tied back in a bun, sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. Her condo was modern and sunlit, very unaccountant-like. Charlotte Grant, she said, studying me. Come in. I've been expecting you. Well, that was ominous. I followed her into a bright kitchen that smelled faintly of cinnamon. You knew I'd show up, I asked, settling at her island. She poured coffee, good coffee this time, and gave a small shrug. Your mother warned me. She told me there would come a day when something wasn't right. I've been keeping certain files, just in case. My breath caught. You mean she knew Owen was doing something? Rebecca's mouth tightened. She suspected. Toward the end, your father wasn't, well, easily confused. And your brother took full advantage. Got them to sign off on documents they didn't fully understand. I warned her. But by then, it was difficult. I pulled the ledger from my bag. I found this. She flipped through the pages quickly, nodding. Yes, this matches my records. I leaned forward. There's an expiring clause in the will, Mr. Callahan told me. I have just over 30 days to challenge this legally. But I need proof. Something stronger than this ledger. Rebecca gave me a small smile. I thought you might say that. She got up and disappeared into another room, returning with a battered file box. Inside, original statements, copies of old wills, notarized documents, some with signatures that clearly didn't match my father's normal hand. I kept these, she said quietly, because I couldn't bear to watch your brother erase your parents' intentions. A knot formed in my throat. Thank you. Rebecca hesitated, then added, there's more. He didn't just manipulate the will, he moved assets illegally. Property transfers done without your mother's consent. If you can get a forensic handwriting expert and a good lawyer, you might have a case. Might. She gave a rueful laugh. Owen's smart. He's covered his tracks well, but not perfectly. I sat back, my mind racing. 30 days wasn't much time. I'd need help. That night, I made another call to an old friend from my freelance circles, Paige Nolan, a former paralegal who now worked in real estate law. When I told her the story, there was a long pause on the line. Then, damn, Charlie, you're in deep. Yeah. I said, but I think I can win. Another pause. You're gonna need a shark. I know. And your brother, she asked. How far would he go to stop you? I thought of Owen's voice on the phone. Let it go. For your own good. Far, I said quietly. But I'm going further. Paige agreed to help, at least in an advisory role. She even gave me the name of a litigation lawyer she trusted, Victor Hale, known in local circles as a courtroom pit bull. By morning, I had an appointment with Hale, a growing pile of evidence, and a renewed sense of purpose. But I wasn't stupid. I knew Owen wouldn't sit still once he caught wind of this. Sure enough, the next afternoon, a sleek black car pulled up outside my apartment building. I watched from the window as a man in a suit delivered an envelope to my door. Inside, a tersely worded notice of intent from Owen's legal team, warning me against any defamatory actions regarding the estate. I laughed. Nice try. Big brother. If he thought intimidation would stop me. He was about to be very disappointed. I poured myself another coffee, rolled up my sleeves, and started scanning documents. Time was ticking. The deadline loomed. But for the first time in days, I felt something stronger than fear. Resolve. This wasn't over. Not even close. I didn't plan to confront Owen so soon. Really, I didn't. But when you get served a thinly veiled legal threat from your own brother, well, sometimes your plans change. It started with a simple text. I wasn't in the mood for long-winded emails or lawyer speak. Me. We need to talk. Coffee. Tomorrow. You choose the place. To my surprise, he responded within minutes. Owen. 10 a.m. Vespers on Hawthorne. Trendy spot. Of course. Always image conscious. My brother. The next morning, I showed up early. Vespers was packed with the usual hipster crowd, vintage light fixtures, exposed brick, baristas who looked like they stepped out of an indie film. The place smelled like espresso and burnt caramel. I claimed a table near the back where the noise thinned, ordered a black coffee, and waited. Right on the dot, Owen walked in impeccably dressed, as always. Slate gray suit, polished shoes, barely a hair out of place. He looked more like a politician than an architect these days. He spotted me, came over, didn't bother to sit at first. Really, Charlie, he said quietly, dragging this out in public. I gestured to the empty seat. Sit. Or are you afraid someone might hear you? A flicker of annoyance crossed his face, but he sat. We stared at each other for a beat, tension thick as the air between us. Then I laid it out. I know about Grant Holdings, the hidden properties, the transfers Mom never approved. He didn't blink, just sipped his latte. You shouldn't dig so deep. It won't end well. I leaned in, and forging Dad's signature, manipulating a dying man. That's low, even for you. His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed maddeningly calm. You have no proof of forgery. Yet, I let the word hang between us. Another sip. Charlotte. You have no idea how things really work. If you push this, you'll drag the whole family name through the mud. You'll ruin what little is left. I tilted my head. Funny. I thought you already did that. He finally set down his cup with a soft clink. Let me give you one more piece of advice, big sister to little sister. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Walk away. Take your little shack on Dalton. Be grateful. Because if you don't, I promise, you won't like what happens next. There it was. The threat. No more pretending. I met his gaze, steady and calm. I'll take my chances. He stood, straightened his cuffs. You always were stubborn. I smiled sweetly. Runs in the family. Without another word, he walked out, leaving behind only the faint scent of his cologne and an empty coffee cup. I sat there for a moment, pulse racing, then pulled out my phone and texted Paige. Me. Game on, she replied almost instantly. Paige. Let's burn him down. I left Vespers with renewed fire. No more hesitation. No more tiptoeing. If Owen wanted a fight, he was getting one. That afternoon, I met Victor Hale. He was everything Paige promised, broad-shouldered, direct, with a mind sharp enough to cut glass. After a quick glance through my documents, he leaned back in his leather chair and gave a slow smile. "You've got a case," he said, "and a good one. But we'll need more. Handwriting expert, forensic accountant, sworn affidavits. I can pull in the right people, but time's tight. 30 days, I said. He nodded. "We can do it, but be prepared, your brother's gonna fight dirty." I almost laughed. He already started. Victor's grin widened. "Good. Let's return the favor." By that evening, wheels were in motion. Expert appointments scheduled. Legal filings prepped. Rebecca agreed to provide sworn testimony. It was happening. Fast. And then, another text from Owen. "Owen, last chance. Walk away. You've been warned." I stared at the screen. My brother, once my childhood playmate, now trying to bully me into silence. I didn't reply. Didn't need to, because by now, the train had left the station, and there was no stopping it. If Part 5 was the spark, this was the wildfire. Once Victor got involved, everything moved fast, blisteringly fast. My small apartment turned into an impromptu war room. Papers stacked on every flat surface. Post-it notes on the walls. My laptop constantly humming under the weight of scanned documents and legal files. I wasn't alone in this anymore. Either Paige showed up every other day, armed with coffee and legal insight. Rebecca sent over more files as she dug through her old archives. And Victor, he worked like a man possessed. The first big break came from the handwriting expert. I remember the call vividly late afternoon. Gray skies outside, Portland rain in full moody swing. I was halfway through my second pot of coffee when Victor called. "Charlie," he said, voice sharp with energy. "We got it. It's forgery." My breath caught. Your father's signature on those last property transfer documents, 2 clear instances of mechanical tracing. One using a model signature from 5 years earlier. Your brother's fingerprints aren't on the pen. Of course. But the evidence is enough to raise a serious challenge. I nearly dropped my mug. "Victor, this is huge. And there's more." He continued. "The forensic accountant found inconsistencies in the LLC transfer's assets moved to shell companies controlled by Owen. All within 6 months of your father's final hospitalization. A cold wave washed through me. It was worse than I'd thought. My brother hadn't just nudged things in his favor, he'd orchestrated a full-scale fraud operation while our parents were vulnerable. And then, as if the universe had decided to twist the knife further, Rebecca called with one last revelation. "I found an older version of your parents' will," she said. "It was prepared with your father's full consent clear. Equal division of assets, dated only 6 months before the new version your brother filed." I couldn't believe it. Why wasn't it used? Because Owen got them to revoke it through that other firm. But your mother never signed the revocation. "Charlie, I have her letter to me here. She knew something was wrong. She just ran out of time." It was a gut punch. I sat in silence for a long moment, the pieces falling into place. My brother had manipulated our father when he was sick, convinced him to sign off on a redrafted will, and then buried any objections from our mother. And all the while, he was quietly shifting millions in assets out of reach. The depth of his betrayal burned hot in my chest. I updated Victor. He was thrilled. "With this," he said, "we can challenge both the will and the transfers. We'll move for a temporary injunction first thing Monday. He won't be able to touch the assets until the court hears us." The thought gave me a rare moment of relief. Maybe, just maybe, I could stop him in time. Of course, Owen wasn't going down without a fight. 2 days later, a thick packet arrived by courier. Owen's official response, filed through his high-powered legal team. Buried in lawyer speak were accusations that I was unstable, emotionally compromised, acting out of grief. Victor just laughed when he read it. Classic deflection. They've got nothing concrete. But the words still stung. That night, Paige and I sat on my couch, takeout containers scattered between us. "He's going to paint you as the crazy sister," she warned. "They'll try to rattle you. Get ready for it." I poked at my noodles. "Let them—" "I'm not backing down." Paige raised her glass. "That's my girl." The next morning, we filed. By noon, the court issued a temporary freeze on the estate assets pending review. I knew Owen would get the news within hours. And sure enough, that afternoon my phone buzzed again. "Owen, you've made a serious mistake. You'll regret this." I stared at the message, my heart pounding, but not with fear anymore, with resolve. Because now I had the proof, I had the will, and I had a lawyer ready to go for the throat. And Owen was running out of places to hide. The courthouse smelled like old paper and floor polish, a cold, impersonal kind of place. Funny how much of your life could be decided in a room that looked like it belonged to an outdated DMV. I sat at the long polished table next to Victor, heart pounding beneath my blazer. Across from us, Owen sat with his team of attorneys, all sleek suits and steely eyes. He barely glanced my way except for one brief look, sharp and venomous, like I'd personally dragged him here out of spite. In truth, I hadn't wanted this. Who would want to go to war with their own brother? But after what I'd uncovered, well, some lines can't be uncrossed. The room filled quickly. Reporters, too. Small-town gossip spreads fast. And when an old-money family like ours aired dirty laundry, people came running. Victor leaned in. You good? I nodded. Let's burn him down. First came the motions. Then testimony. The judge, a woman named Ramirez, known for no-nonsense rulings, listened intently. Victor started strong, laying out the evidence in methodical waves. The forged signatures proven by our expert. The unlawful transfers traced by forensic accountants. The older will undisputed in its authenticity. And then Rebecca Langston's testimony. She sat calmly under oath, voice steady as she explained how Owen had isolated our father during his illness, pressured both parents to meet with his lawyer, and quietly funneled money into shell companies. Her words landed hard. I watched the judge's expression shift, the tension rising across the aisle. When it was Owen's turn, his lawyers came out swinging. Jealous sibling, estranged from the family, acting out of financial desperation. I gritted my teeth as they painted me as some unhinged spinster, desperate for a payday. But Victor was ready. His cross-examination was brutal, especially when he cornered one of Owen's accountants about the timing of those transfers. Then came the bombshell Victor called the attorney from the other firm. Under pressure, the man admitted that my father was heavily medicated during the final signing session. No true capacity to consent. The air went electric. I heard gasps from the gallery. Owen's mask finally cracked. His jaw clenched, a flush creeping up his neck. That was when it hit me. He knew it was over. But the hardest part wasn't winning. It was watching our family unravel in public. The press coverage was brutal. Headlines splashed my name and Owen's across local news sites. Old friends called, some siding with me, others calling it a family embarrassment. An aunt texted me, "Why couldn't you two settle this privately?" As if I'd wanted this mess. When the final ruling came down 2 weeks later, it was swift. The fraudulent will voided. The original equal division will reinstated. The illegally transferred assets returned to the estate. I'd won, and yet, sitting there with Victor, the weight of it hit me like a punch to the chest. Because while I'd reclaimed what was rightfully mine, something else was broken beyond repair. My family. Owen stormed out of the courtroom without a word. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just gone. Rebecca squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. I nodded. Throat tight, it should have felt like victory. But all I could feel was loss. A month after the ruling, I stood alone in the grand front hall of the West Hills estate. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, catching the dust in the air. The familiar creak of old floorboards beneath my boots echoed off the high ceilings. It felt empty, not just of furniture, though most of that had been removed during the legal freeze, but of the warmth I remembered from childhood. No voices, no holiday music echoing up the stairs, no scent of Mom's cinnamon bread baking in the kitchen. Just hollow space. Technically, I now owned half of it. Legally, I could force a sale or negotiate a buyout. Financially, it was a win. The rebalanced estate now included not just this house, but a portfolio of properties and assets Owen had tried to steal. But emotionally, it didn't feel like a victory. Not really. Owen hadn't spoken to me since the ruling. When the official transfer documents arrived, he signed with a single scrawled signature. No note, no call. Some cousins had quietly cut contact. Others sent awkward, neutral texts. The gossip in family circles was vicious, some painting me as a hero, others as a greedy traitor. The worst part? I kept replaying all of it in my head. Could I have done something differently? Could I have prevented it from going this far? Then I'd remember Dad's real signature, my mother's warning letter, Owen's threats, and the doubt would fade. He'd crossed too many lines. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. I walked slowly through each room of the house that day, taking it all in. The old study where I used to curl up with library books. The staircase I'd tumbled down at age 6. The faded marks on the kitchen wall where Mom used to measure our heights in pencil. Memories layered over each space like translucent film, good ones and painful ones alike. And beneath it all, a quiet sadness. I wasn't that little girl anymore, and this wasn't home anymore. By late afternoon, I stood outside in the cool breeze. The sprawling view of the city spread out below the hill. I pulled out my phone, stared at Owen's contact. For one wild moment, I thought about texting him. Some olive branch, some attempt at repair. But then I pictured his face across from me at Vespers. That cold smirk, that final text. You'll regret this. I slid the phone back into my pocket. Some things can't be fixed. And maybe that's okay. Instead, I called Victor. I've thought it over, I told him. I don't want to keep the house. Sell it. Donate my share of the proceeds, half to the Portland Legal Aid Fund, half to the city's youth arts program. Something good should come from this. There was a pause. Then, you sure? Yeah, I said softly. It's time to let go. Later that evening, back in my little apartment, I poured a glass of wine and sat by the window, watching the lights of the city flicker below. I didn't have millions in my bank account. I didn't have a family dinner to look forward to this holiday season. But I did have peace. Hard-earned, costly. But mine. If you've made it this far, listening to my story, thank you. If there's one thing I've learned through all this, it's that sometimes standing up for yourself comes with a price. But sometimes, that's exactly what makes it worth it. Take care of yourselves, out there. And remember, no one can take away your truth unless you let them. Good night, friends.